Hi, listeners. You're listening to YUH with Lisa
and Phil.
And this week we have the stars of rock and roll archaeology. Yes. I said that right, didn't I?
No, we're rock and roll heaven.
Oh, rock and roll heaven.
Rock and roll heaven, right?
Oh, I apologize.
And did you make air quotes around stars?
It's very important.
Whatever you need.
We need the bunny.
It's about this moment they realize they booked the wrong act.
So like,
oh no, we definitely booked the right act.
You're supposed to get that guy pop off. That's what it was.
Pop off.
Is somebody doing Manfred Mann's Earth Band references?
Oh, darn,
oh, that was going to be our shtick.
Yeah,
okay.
we were gonna honor you with that. But that's great.
We will take anything.
Yeah. Federally mandated mention of Manfred Mann Earth Band.
Exactly.
So should we tell this actually is what the surprise that I was discussing in the pre-interview. LD, do you just want to go ahead and tell them now?
I said we do it on air. No,
yes.
It's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
We're on air.
We can do it
as on air as we get. We record it and then
Yeah.
Well, perfect. So this morning I woke up and like you do, I didn't want to wake my husband up because he can sleep maybe like a half hour later than me. I just naturally wake up at like 7 a.m. So I went up, went to the bathroom, took my cell phone with me like you do. And I'm scrolling through Facebook and I get a notification and I'm like, what on earth is this? And I click on it and it is an invitation from Manfred Mann's Earth Band to join a private Facebook group.
Oh, cool.
So for those who have never heard our program, we just kind of, because we started doing it, not for any real reason. The reason was we noticed that in doing shows about people other than Manfred Mann's Earth Band came up an inordinate number of times. And I jokingly once called it the federally mandated Manfred Mann's Earth Band reference of the podcast. And then without discussing it or planning it or anything, we all just started writing Manfred Mann into every single episode that we do. and we started to joke like, they're going to catch on to us and say, and have a lawyer explain to us there's a difference between a running gag and defamation.
Yeah.
And then out of nowhere today, LD gets like an invite from them to a Facebook group.
Well,
so much to my surprise, when I'm shaken from my slumber to hear, honey, you gotta come here. So I go out and I take one look at the cell phone, pass through the door, and my first response is, they found us.
Oh no!
I don't feel bad picking him up. I did not feel bad waking him up.
The jig is up.
The jig is up, guys. Sorry.
Was that better, or was the Beastie Boys following a better revelation?
It was just weird that the Beastie Boys would ever follow me on Twitter anyway, and they were literally like the third people to ever follow me, and to this day they still follow me.
And like you weren't like, you're not like a newcomer to Twitter. Like you got an account not long after Twitter started.
Yeah, like 2009, I think, or something like that.
Your third follower, the official verified blue check mark Beastie Boys.
Yep.
Yeah.
So like Mike Diamond's sitting there in the pool room or something like that, just fidgeting on his phone, and he just
he sees updates from you.
I'm followed by Whitney Houston, but she only has three followers, so it's probably not actually Whitney. And then plus she's dead.
It certainly would be Whitney.
If it's Whitney, then
it might be
the
Whitney Houston, just not the one you're thinking.
Yeah, her neck.
And they said that they claim to live in like Sugar Tit, South Carolina or somewhere, so it's probably not like actually anybody affiliated with Whitney Houston.
Probably not. Yeah. So
that's by the way, that's a real town. That's a real town not far from where I live. I didn't make that up at random.
What did you call that?
Sugar Tit.
Sugar Tit.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
We have
look it up. Sugar Tit, South Carolina. There's a racetrack there.
Oh, believe me, we believe you.
Yeah. But you said that you mentioned you're kind of stars around our house because I started, listening to you guys. Like I was into these Pantheon podcasts. I like music podcasts to begin with. So I'm like looking through the Pantheon group of podcasts. It's about 30 podcasts or something, and they got like Pamela DeBar on there, and they got that Max Popov, and I've listened to some of that. I sampled it, and it was okay. But then when I found you guys, the first thing I always do when I start looking through these podcasts, I try to find groups or individuals that interest me. And so the first one I saw was John Bonham. because I'm a Led Zeppelin fan. Right? So I listened to that one, and I was duly impressed. You know, there were some things I learned about John Bonham that I never knew.
And believe me, he researches stuff
involving like
not like
someone's
you do.
purse, and something that he deposited in at one time, and then just some interesting facts.
He went to the bathroom in somebody's purse.
I believe he
did frequently.
That is the legend, yes.
Yeah, well, at the first part is a legend. That he did it in a lady's shoe is not a legend. That's verified.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Gonzo Bonzo.
I mean, my mother-in-law caught me putting money in her purse one time, but
Apparently, when John got out on the tiles was his term for going out and drinking like a lot. When he got out on the tiles, it was a really bad idea to leave bags or purses unattended because he would just drop a hot one in them, then close it up and let you find it later.
Yeah.
Oh, so he just thought he was cute.
He didn't do it in front of you. So then I imagine like some poor lady, like she's like reaching in her bag for her chapstick or something.
So he got kind of a high persona because they always say like he was, when he was sober, that he was always
So he could be biologically related to the males in my family because the drunk males in my family are different people than the sober ones.
Yeah.
That's a fact in my family.
Yeah. And then actually, my grandmother was born at home in a holler in Morgan County, Kentucky. So
nice.
Way in Appalachia. Mm-hmm.
Our, mine and LD's grandmother was one of 13.
Right.
Yep.
My grandmother
on a cotton farm in Fairfield County, South Carolina. So very, very similar backgrounds.
Now, they did actually have their own property at the time. There was some production of alcohol involved in that property.
Yep. Same.
Yeah. See, my great-grandmother ran a bed and breakfast. She had 4 living children that made it to adulthood out of 13, which not uncommon, especially when you're giving birth at home.
Sure. And we actually have, so just a very quick backstory that has nothing to do with anything. Once upon a time, our grandmother showed us a picture, and she had always talked about her 11 brothers and sisters. But I'm looking at this picture, there's 12 of them. And I said, Grandma, I thought you always told me that there were 12 of y'all. And she kind of scowled and she pointed at this one brother and she said, we don't talk about him. And I said, why not? She said, because she said, he caroused. He drank the demon rum and he gambled and he chased women and he went off to Vegas and did all these terrible things there. And then he went to Los Angeles to be some actor. And I was like, he sounds like the coolest great uncle ever. Why haven't you ever told us about him?
Yeah, little did you know that I would actually turn out to be exactly like him.
Yes, minus the chasing women part.
Yeah.
But she took a dim view of him because he drank the demon rum and also, and I quote, took the dope.
Yeah. So it's really funny because if you watch old John Wayne movies, you can see our uncle or our great uncle sitting on a fence post at the OK Corral or whatever. He was the extra in Westerns.
Yeah.
Yep, that was him.
So he was regularly employed. Possibly.
He probably played people named Tex or Festus 500 times. But
well, I mean, the thing is, even though getting back to John Bonham, even though I was intensely interested in him, but then when I started listening to some of the heavy hitter series of podcasts, I started to realize I didn't have to be vested in the musician to begin with to enjoy the podcast because the amount of research and interesting facts that you all put into these podcasts. For instance, just the most recent, Dusty Springfield. I mean, the amount of
and I can see a lot of how maybe someone like Demi Lovato could have gone the way Dusty Springfield did had she not gotten mental health.
Times have totally changed now with our look on mental health and wellness. And now you have creators that are out there advocating for mental health and saying it's okay to freak out. It's okay to have this doubt. It's okay to have shame, but let's talk about it and figure out the root of it and become a better person for it. Because you can't bottle everything up. And that was the problem, was it had such a stigma attached to it that people were afraid to get any kind of help. I mean, Dusty would see a string of, quote unquote psychiatrists, but she would only see them one at a time and when she was hospitalized. Right. And so I think, now it's, people like I was saying, Georgia Hardstark and, of My Favorite Murder is posting pictures of her holding a handful of the pills that she has to take to stay stable. So she's like normalizing this kind of culture. And I think that's so important for us to have that conversation and to say, it's okay to not be okay. And somebody like Dusty, she had somebody that was, not like, oh my God, you're Dusty Springfield, I'll give you whatever you want. It was, Dusty, I understand who you are and where you're coming from. Let's actually talk about that trauma that you had to deal with as a child. And maybe dealing with the root of the issue maybe could have saved her in the end. I mean, she died of breast cancer, but there was a lot of fear in going to doctors because of that. And I think that contributed to her not getting those normal exams that you need to keep yourself healthy. Dusty also did self-harm as well.
She did.
So,
yes.
Yeah.
It directly affected her career as it progressed. But I thought it was beautiful that, towards the end of her life, and some of her last tracks, she seemed to recapture some of the magic,
Yeah. And just for her to be honored by the OBE and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I think meant a lot to her, but she was very cynical about getting those honors because for so long she had been ignored. And the thing is, she is probably one of the most not only beautiful, but interesting, introspective, fantastic vocalists that I've ever covered and had the pleasure of sitting down and spending, 2 months and 6 hours on. So, I'm glad that she finally got the honor that she deserved. But honestly, like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has a serious issue with
everything.
Timely. Yeah. Being very tired. Like I'm almost positive if I created another Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to rival them, I would be honored because people would actually get into it. It wouldn't be this banal baloney that they like. The fact that they shut out women constantly, the fact that they shut out
country almost entirely.
And then R&B and even rap artists that have made contributions. Like, oh my God, they're the worst.
They seem to have a real problem with rock and roll.
Yeah,
if you want to be honest about it.
Right.
Which reminds me, how much time do we have? Because
we are at your disposal.
Well, I mean, that could be a whole.
No, that was more of a joke. I meant that facetiously.
I meant if you ever want to have dinner tomorrow night, you probably should put a time limit on how long my brother can curse about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
That topic is quite lengthy about what they've done wrong.
I made a list. Of people that I'm angry about.
But I made a short list of my own.
I think we could bring that down to the name Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, first of all. Second of all, isn't it very corporate? So
it is. Well,
Hall of Fame.
I think we can all agree that it's much more at this point a popular music Hall of Fame than a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because there are a lot of artists that bear no resemblance at all to rock and roll.
I think the one thing that blew my mind was the fact that Whitney Houston got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame before Dionne Warwick.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Her aunt who had a considerably longer career.
Right.
And Pat Benatar is still on the waiting list, which is absolutely criminal.
So first of all,
really?
There are people who are in.
Willie Nelson is not in it.
Waylon Jennings is not in. Dolly Parton is not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Music Icon Hall of Fame. Where do we go? What do we do? How do we start it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sure, or Popular Music Hall of Fame or something beyond. Yeah. Because there are lots of people who are in there who they don't play rock and roll. Now, they deserve recognition. Donna Summer would be somebody that comes to mind immediately. Madonna, people like that. But you started a precedent on one hand that you wanted to honor some of the early influencers. So like Hank Williams is in the Hall of Fame, and he should 100% be there. Patsy Cline's not. Dolly Parton is not.
The Monkees, 30 years of career, like 30 years they've been eligible to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The Monkees.
Why have we not just appointed her benevolent dictator, Dolly?
The Monkees was where my music started. I would kiss the TV when Davy Jones came on. I had no idea he was 30 years older than me at the time.
Right.
Because I was
Well,
born the year
well,
they started the show.
Yeah, I mean the monkeys have been eligible for 30 years and they have not been inducted yet. The guys basically pioneered what we would consider the nexus of music videos.
Yeah. Well, and that's not even and let's move even beyond that. The fact that Boston's not there. How about Bad Company's not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
The Carpenters, 27 years they've been eligible, and the Carpenters are not there.
What about like Judas Priest?
Tina Turner just went in.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
This year.
That's the thing. Is they've almost become like the DMV at this point because there's only five people that can get in per year. Okay. 5 per year.
Which is baloney. And again, categorically, it's inconsistent on top of the fact that they've yet to single out solo artists versus groups that they were attached to. So it's all become a mess with artists like Stevie Nicks, who finally got in, but Hagar is still waiting. Lionel Richie and the Commodores. Lionel Richie and the Commodores.
Ozzy Osbourne is not in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Now, Sabbath is. I would argue he did a lot more better music solo than he ever did with Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just for like the Oscars, they can do up to 10, which is just like an arbitrary number of possible best.
Limit they created for themselves.
Well, they do like 15 NFL football players every year. It's like
right. Well, but like the Baseball Hall of Fame a couple of years ago had no inductees, and they can have. There's no limit on how many they can have. That's to me a much more fair way to do it.
Well, I'm thinking like
but you could go through it's not just who's in there and who's not. That's a problem to start with. There's a bias against country. There's a bias against heavy metal for sure.
There's a bias against women.
There's a bias against women. The fact that Dolly Parton and Patsy Cline aren't in is ridiculous.
Cher, Emmylou Harris, Peter, Paul and Mary, Pat Benatar, like the Carpenters, led by Karen Carpenter, Cher, Salt and Pepper. Let's just talk about.
But it's not just a matter of who's in and who's not in. It's a matter of how long certain people had to wait to get in. The Steve Miller Band just went in a few years ago. Cheap Trick just went in a couple of years ago. That Van Halen had to wait 3 years after they were eligible is the most laughably stupid thing I've ever heard of in my life.
What about Kiss? Took them forever.
Kiss had to wait forever to get in. Yeah. Sabbath had to wait forever to get in. Stevie Ray Vaughan had to wait. And I'm like, what? Like, if your criteria is obviously not was popular, great at what they did, played in front of millions of people, and sold a shit ton of albums. But and if that's not your criteria, what is your criteria?
I mean, a lot of these people
that critics thought they were cool or something. That's kind of what it seems like some years. Seriously,
they want to be inclusive and they want to include all these other genres, like country and jazz and stuff like that.
Doesn't seem that way to me.
Why not have different wings or something? Just,
that's a thought.
There are only, I think, 11 people who were both in the country music and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And there again, you look at the Highwaymen. Only one member of that band is in. That would be Johnny Cash, and he belongs there. Waylon's not. Willie's not. Chris Christopherson's not in.
Wow.
Now
that's crazy.
Patsy Cline's not in. Garth Brooks should be in there for crying out loud. He sold more albums than anybody.
What about Loretta Lynn? She's not in, right?
Loretta's not in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And I think, Phil, you brought up a good point because one of the sore spots that a lot of people bring up is John Coltrane. That he's not in.
The number one dude on most lists of
well,
it's John Coltrane. And you got to think, can there be a separation where you have, country, jazz, R&B, to get not only, it's not just about giving out more awards because then it becomes, the second grade track and field competition where everyone gets a trophy. But at the same time, you have to honor the artist for their contribution.
And not to mention, think about this. Buck Owens is not in the Hall of Fame. Buck Owens is not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He was a huge influence on the Beatles, who are largely acknowledged as the most influential rock band in the history of the genre. So how can you not put in a guy who influenced them and who, oh, by the way, had 21 number one country hits?
Right.
Yeah.
And was on Hee Haw for crying out loud.
I got 3 words for you. Weird Al Yankovic.
Yep.
17 years. That's for our anniversary. We do that.
Yeah, that's our anniversary tradition. We try to see Weird Al.
Yeah. So I've seen him 7 times out of our 10 years of being married.
I have
wow.
never been able to go see him.
You need to.
You have to.
You need to. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to.
But not to get off in the weeds, but is Weird Al like a great musician?
Yes. Are you kidding? You know
Yes.
nothing about the man who shares my
I'm not
birthday.
kidding. I'm asking.
Nothing. I've told
I mean,
all
if
of
He
you.
is a legend.
Also, Dwight Yoakam.
Yeah.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
a
Oh. Okay. Now you're hitting me in the feels. Dwight's one of my favorites ever.
Yeah.
I love Dwight Yoakam.
I mean, he just seems so like down to earth, and and all of us are weird and awkward and just like, why do people want to see us in public?
Right. And Dwight, on top of that,
Yeah,
is cited as an influence. He's cited as an influence by tons of people in almost every genre of music that you can name. There's also nobody who does better remakes of songs than Dwight Yoakam.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like
his version of Purple. His version of Purple Rain is the best thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
I've heard that. Yeah.
And on top of the fact that he's just very cool and he's always been different. And I would have thought that somebody like that who really stands out from the pack would be somebody who would be honored, and he hasn't been. I would actually tell you, I worked in radio for a long time before I started my current job of being a journalist, and we would get these magazines, these like trade publications and stuff, and in retrospect, this was a maddening exercise and incredibly stupid, but you would have all these songs and they'd be listed, and they would have all these charts and what was the most added song that week and all that kind of stuff. But the last thing they would put was a grade, like 1 to 100 of how the song had tested in front of like a group of soccer moms, I'm presuming, because anything that veered from being right down the middle, being very black, to be honest with you, to just be like bland background music would have a lower quote grade or audience score than stuff that was just very meh. So people like Dwight, who stood out a little bit, always had the songs that were the lowest scored by test audiences, and that's what determined airplay a lot. And in retrospect, that infuriates me.
Yeah.
So you're going to hold it against him that he's different and better than everybody else.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty good actor.
But by all means, let's make sure we play that latest Confederate Railroad record 5 bajillion times.
Wow, that was my first concert ever.
I thought Little Texas was your first concert.
Who did Trashy Women?
That was Confederate Railroad.
That was my first one.
Oh wow, Danny Shirley and the boys.
So you mentioned Buck Owens. He was kind of responsible for that Bakersfield sound, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's something that might hit home with a Californian. I don't know how long you guys have been out there, but I heard.
The two of them have been out there for quite a while. For those who've ever heard our show where we talk about me being the giggling hillbilly, like we're not joking. I mean, I still live in South Carolina, but I love Buck Owens, and it's a very little known fact that first of all that he was on the same record label as the Beatles, and that 4 copies of every new Buck Owens album were delivered to the Beatles before they were actually put on store shelves. That's how big a fan they were and how influenced they were. They obviously covered one of his songs, Act Naturally, but they were hugely influenced by American country, particularly Buck Owens. So the fact that he's not in the Hall of Fame is laughably dumb.
That is crazy. It was a revelation in one podcast I heard. I can't remember what it was. The guy only did 1 season, but he did 1 episode on Buck Owens. It just blew my mind. And some of the rapport he had with his band, some of the live concerts and stuff was really awesome. He had like a long-standing partner that he worked.
Did he mention the fact that Buck essentially had like $100 bills falling out of his butt? He's in the Sammy Hagar, you have no idea how rich that dude is category, because Buck bought like 100 or so radio stations when they were very cheap. And then when all the deregulation stuff happened in the mid 90s, I think Clear Channel bought all of them from him for like a couple of $100 million.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Buck had like FU money big time. Plus, I mean, on top of whatever he made from music and from being on Hee Haw and stuff like that.
But yeah, I mean, when I was growing up, my parents watched Hee Haw, and I just looked at him. Well, that's a guy that's with the picking and the grinning. And I thought it's the same way with Roy Clark. I was like, well, these guys are just like, the guys that sit on the front porch somewhere. But Roy Clark was a fantastic guitarist. Is he in the Hall?
No kidding, he was.
Yeah,
We actually did an episode on Roy Clark. So
funny thing, LD and I watched Hee Haw and thought that we were related to the Colehans of Cornfield County.
Hey, who knows?
Essentially.
Yeah. That show had its moments, I thought it was kind of corny.
Hey, Grandpa, what's for dinner?
Yeah.
Minnie Pearl. Yeah.
Yep, the hat with the price tag.
But I mean,
I have a friend. I have a friend that to this day. If I call him up and just say "Where oh where," he will start singing the song.
Are you tonight?
Where are you tonight? Why'd you leave me here
all alone? I searched the world over, thought I found true love.
You met another, and
you was gone.
Somewhere my mom's smiling. She loved that show.
Yeah.
But,
that was oddly one of the only, about the only musical experience LD or I would have had outside of old soul and R&B when we were growing up was probably Hee Haw, the Mandrell sisters on their show, and Dolly Parton's TV show. That was about it.
Being as metropolitan as Cincinnati is, wink, wink, we did actually have access to the like Soul Train.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could.
Oh, wow.
If our parents let us.
Oh, it came on TV, you mean?
Yeah, it was on TV.
Well, there was like
So
the
there's
Statler
that.
Brothers had a
But
show,
other than
and
that-
Johnny Cash had a show, but that's all
Yeah.
like older than me.
Yeah. I remember how excited my parents were to let us watch Donnie and Marie.
Yeah. But so you guys take some of these artists that we know tangentially, I guess, from TV, like Buck Owens and Dusty, and you bring them to life in these 4-part heavy hitter series podcasts that I find so immersive. Like I was out on my porch doing my deck when I was listening to the Van Halen. I listened to it straight shot all the way through because I was working for like 9 hours, and totally had me immersed. And so I knew a little bit about Van Halen, but some of these other artists I don't know about. So I thought maybe you might want to talk about the process you guys go through and the draft and who we might be able to look forward to.
Yeah,
for
how
the
do you
remainder
find some of these
the
obscure
year.
facts?
Yeah, and your research. How you do your research.
Is it
So-
inside information?
So for me, well, in some cases, yes, it is. I've been in the music industry for a while now. I'm actually on my 5th season right now, casting for American Idol, and so I've got that. I'm pretty darn good friends with one country music superstar who will be kind of chipping in for our Charlie Pride episode when we do that in the future. But, I've got people like London Miller on my phone that I can just call and be like, hey, could you just tell me this part about this Motown artist? And so that's, we've got some of those. That's just a little bit of the things that are coming up. But like, I can only speak to my process, which is I completely immerse myself in these people. Like I'll buy all the books, I'll watch the documentaries, I'll listen to the music. And I do my episodes in a more linear fashion, because it's so much easier as like a type A person to go, okay, this happened this year, this happened this year, this happened this year, and then they died. And for me, it's easier that way. Now, I can only speak to my process because I know that, with my books and stuff, I do talk to text because I've discovered that I can't type things out and it's got to come out of my mouth before, but it also helps me with the pronunciation, which of course, so that's my process, is like, I can talk to certain people about things, watching these documentaries, reading these books. That's how my process is. Will, why don't you tell them about your process? Because your process is slightly different than mine, and I know T's is way different.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at an artist, I review their entire catalog, which has been more or less harrowing depending on the artist and the depth of that collection. From there, for me, interviews are key. I love interviews. Give me interviews at any point in their life. Give me interviews with people who know them. I love books. For example, one of our upcoming series is, speaking of Rock and Roll Hall of Fame snubs, is going to be the great Jim Croce. And Yeah. Reading a book that was co-authored by
albums.
Say it one more time.
I spent a year just obsessively listening. That's all I listened to for like a year.
Oh yeah, they're all good. They're all good.
Oh
And
yeah.
one of the pieces of my research was a book co-authored by his widow, Ingrid. Just that perspective. Again, all the interviews and the quotes. That's where I live in doing my research. I love getting that information.
And we should say the heavy hitter series is kind of a new thing for us. Before it was like each of us would do
a random.
Yeah. Like, and then there was a point where I went, because I don't know if you guys are working your way backwards or started at the beginning, but we had another girl that was the host with me prior to
the first year, right?
The guys coming on. So when we started, it was me and another girl named TJ, because I can't not have a podcast with someone named TJ. There must be a TJ. So she was TJ, and she was the only person in her department at work. And when COVID hit, because she was the forefront of the streaming, she had to get all the shows onto streaming services. She became way too involved in that and had to step away. And so,
and so a lot of people said no, and she ended up inviting me as a desperate last resort. God, I'm going to have to ask my brother.
Oh, crap. So actually beforehand I had, I started the podcast. I would do the research. I would do the editing. I was paying for a platform and everything. And so finally one day Pantheon reached out to me and was like, "Hey, we're really interested in repping your podcast." And I was like, "Great." So they took the money off the hands. They would host it. They had the platform to host it on. So that cut my cost, which was awesome. And then they also, were fantastic in, getting the word out. They gave us a new logo. Before our logo was terrible because I designed it and I am not good at graphics at all. But prior to that, like, we actually had to worry about a time frame, because I know some podcasters out there are like, "Oh, I get that," where it's like, if you go over 6 hours, they charge you an arm and a leg for like an extra minute. So we really in the beginning had to watch our length. And so some of them would be like 45 minutes long and
have no music in them almost.
And had no music in them. And so, then when we became a part of the Pantheon family, we could do any length of time that we wanted to. And
actually play songs without fear of copyright reprisal.
Yes, certainly.
Well, there's that one company that isn't fond of us. But so the funny thing is, about December of 2019, LD Will were coming home to South Carolina for Christmas, and I said, "Hey, it'll be fun while you're here. Let's do one of your podcasts." And she was like, "Oh yeah, that'd be fun." So she instructed me specifically to pick somebody that probably she or her then co-host would never pick. So I picked Pat Denizio from the Smithereens, because I'm just a big fan of the Smithereens. And she comes home and she like literally tells me like one morning, like, "So you're going to be ready to record that podcast episode like this evening?" I was like, sure. Having done no research of any kind. So I basically printed some stuff off the internet and winged it.
Yeah.
Completely winged it, and drank heavily throughout the entire episode and was hammered by the time we were finished. Made tons of inappropriate jokes, including one about Belinda Carlisle that I think she took out. And if you could hear if you could hear what hits the cutting room floor, I'm just telling you, there's some gold there. So anyway,
rock and roll heaven after dark.
All right, rock and roll heaven after dark. So
no, I'm not doing anything after dark with my brother. That's crazy.
So anyway, I did this one episode. I did this one episode. I drank heavily. I said lots of inappropriate things she had to cut out. There were probably lots of vocal pauses and things. And I was like, well, that'll be a one-off. We're pretty much done with that. So imagine my surprise a few months later, and she was like, "Hey, the network thinks it would be really cool if you joined along with me." And I was like, "Why?" Was it the awkward vocal pauses? Was it the terrible language, the inappropriate jokes, the awkward vocal pauses? What sold them on me?
All of it.
I guess all of those things is the answer. So Will the Thrill and I then joined along, and I actually didn't take the name TJ just to have another TJ. Those are actually my initials.
Yeah.
It just so happens she worked with, my predecessor was also TJ. I do things a tad different than LD. She reads a lot of books to prepare for. She finds lots of biographies, autobiographies, and she digests those whole things. God, I don't know how she does it. I'm a newspaper editor by trade, and I write a lot for my newspaper. So I cannot envision a scenario where in my free time I read books, because all I do for all day every day is read and write. That's all I do. So but very similar to her, I do immerse myself in the music of the person that I'm tackling. When I did the episode on Eddie Van Halen, and I'm thrilled that you loved it, Phil. All I listened to for a solid month, was literally everything that Van Halen ever did. And I mean, that's
even Van Halen 3.
The arduous chore of listening to Van Halen 3. I listened to the whole Dave era, the whole Sammy era, that unfortunate part with Gary Cherone. I listened to music that Eddie Van Halen recorded for some porn movie, which is ridiculous. Like music he recorded for some movie that Valerie Bertinelli was in, like a soundtrack. It literally everything they ever did, I listened to prepare for it. And I read more like newspaper articles and listen to more interviews. It's more my tact for preparing. And if you actually listen to the episodes I do, they're written like newspaper articles, complete with a lead. Like that's kind of how I attack it.
That's what
LD has a history, right? That's because that's what I know. LD has a history of, and she didn't even mention this, but she should have, of being a documentarian, and hers are very much like she's doing an actual documentary film. And then Will is also, he's a writer and whatnot, and he has his own style. So we all kind of bring a different flavor to the proceedings, it feels like.
Yeah, you guys are just better speakers than me, because like if I'm reading something, it's so weird because I've been an actor since I was 4 years old, so you think I'd do better with like scripts, but no, it's actually worse.
Yeah, she sucks.
Yeah, no, awful. I'm terrible. The only reason why this podcast exists is because I made it and then they made it better.
Well, it's interesting that we talked about this the other day. I think the real genesis of this came, TJ, in the wee hours of the morning in your kitchen.
Yeah.
On our trips home, we would sit in the kitchen, the three of us, and just debate music for hours.
Yeah.
And drink. And drink.
I don't drink. I would drink Mellow Yellow.
So I think what came out of that were a lot of these sort of hypothetical playlists and artists that should be matched together and sort of super groups that we form on our own. So I think that was really the nugget.
Yeah, and legitimately, I think at one point, one of us said something to the effect of, well, I would just argue that anybody who thinks Candio is a better album than Heartbeat City is a mouth-breathing cretin who poops in the sink.
That's what you bring
in us discussing Rick Ocasek and the Cars. Somebody at one or the other probably made
we have to cover Rick
that.
Ocasek. We have to cover him.
Yeah.
So, but it comes across as very effortless. And I know it wasn't because of the volume of information, but it's sort of, you're taking something that you did for enjoyment and would come organically when you all got together at a family occasion and talk about, and you're taking it on the air, and it really comes across that way. And I have to say,
the love of what you do definitely shines through.
So I listened to some of the earlier episodes, and now I understand a little bit why the first TJ may have been concerned about time constraints and stuff because of their situation with your podcast and stuff. But I do think that the more recent episodes, because of this chemistry you all have, is just from my listener point of view, is
not to put her down.
No, not at all. Not at all.
No.
And we appreciate that. If you could hear most of what you hear is about the way we record it. Most of them don't require a lot of editing. The one exception
Joe Diffie.
Well, not a mammoth amount, but the one exception would be Joe Diffie. Oh my God.
I believe the quote after finishing, I believe the quote was, "This episode is never going to air."
How much raw recording did you end up with? I mean, like seriously, like 5 hours?
It was something like 4 hours and 15 minutes. And the thing is, we've discovered there's a real sweet spot when we record of time. And like if you get it any later, we are super punchy, and we start, if you can't tell, we talk over each other all the time, and that's just family, you know. And so when we did Joe Diffie, I think I was working 2 separate jobs. It was 2020. It was the pandemic. Everybody was freaking out. I think both Will and TJ had copious amounts of liquor because they weren't working, and like it was just so bad. Joe Diffie was maybe the one, and then I edited it, and it took me about 7 to 8 hours to edit it.
Just to edit it, that was without question like hot garbage in a taco shell. We talked for 5 hours, and we had at the end of it, I'm like, I don't even know that we got anything. Like that was terrible.
Yeah.
It was.
I would argue that LD should have been admitted to the editors union based on that alone.
Based on that alone,
how she made that palatable is beyond me.
And that's really the only time it's ever happened to us. Where, and you know, anytime you have a creative pursuit, sometimes it's just not clicking. You know, sometimes you go see a band and maybe it's that there's a full moon. Maybe it's what they ate for breakfast, but they suck. They're great, but it's just not working for some reason.
It does happen. Chemistry can come and go a little.
But it was awful. And she cut it down legitimately 4.5 or 5 hours that we carried on to like 90 minutes. And you'd never tell from listening to the episode that we had any problem. I was gonna say she deserved like an Oscar, a Tony, and the freaking Heisman Trophy for turning that pile of slop into something anybody would want to listen to.
Yeah. Do you use Audacity, or what do you use for editing, LT?
I do the Adobe Suite. So okay. I do Audition. I use Audition.
And for those who don't know, this is a bi-coastal production. They're in California and I'm in South Carolina. So
right.
You know what? I don't think we actually introduced you all individually. So like
no.
an hour.
Yeah, we just kind of started talking and took over. We apologize.
Yeah. If you want to know who these people are, listen to Rock and Roll Heaven or else.
Yeah. Collectively, the Rock and Roll Heaven. That's all you need to know. But, you know, you got LP with Will the Thrill, TJ2 checking in from down south.
From Carolina.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I knew I was going to like you guys' podcast, the first one that I ever listened to. I want to tell you that. So, little inside baseball. You guys had contacted us and told us like, hey, we were staining our deck this weekend and we listened to the entire like Eddie Van Halen and Whitney Houston series.
Yeah.
and hey, why don't you come on and talk with us? So I was like, well, let me check these guys out and see what's up. So I pulled up one of your podcasts and I listened to it, and I don't remember the guy's name. It was a former like radio guy, I think, and you talked a lot about. Okay, right, him. And he talked about having been sued by somebody for blowing smoke in their face, like cigar smoke in their face. And and I laughed like a moron when he talked about that, because I once received a legal cease and desist letter from a clown. Like an actual like big red nose, floppy shoes wearing clown.
I want every clown to have a cease and desist order for me.
Right.
I got it. Like and it came like certified mail. I had to sign for it. I started reading. I just started laughing.
Okay, we need some little background. Yeah.
I'm like, this is a serious legal thing, and I can't stop laughing at it.
Believe me, I'm there.
So did it get to court?
So basically, like, okay, so I work for a newspaper. I'm the editor and a writer for a newspaper, and there was some little festival coming up in a little town in the county our paper's in, and we just had a little short preview story of it. And as you do in those instances, you pull an old picture and run it with it, or a picture that you took at the event the previous year that didn't run in your paper. And so we picked one, and it was colorful and happy, and there's these smiling children around this clown, you know? Mm-hmm. And so we ran that. And then I get the legal cease and desist letter from like Floppy the Clown or whoever it was, saying who was apparently owed money by the festival people, like they had not paid her the previous year. And but there's a link, and it was legit, like on like stationery from like a legal firm. And it's like, I, Floppy the Clown, am instructing you to herefore cease and desist from use of my images or likeness.
Did a car pull up and lawyers just kept coming out of it?
Like 20 lawyers came out of a tiny little car, right?
Like a VW bug or something. Yeah, that's hilarious.
And she ran inside and like sprayed a bottle of seltzer down my pants or something.
And I'd argue most lawyers are more clown-like than floppy there, but go ahead.
Yeah, and I mean, it's publicity, regardless. It's publicity. Wow. That, I don't blame you for
I just found it incredibly funny. And see, so that came, I had two really weird things happen to me professionally within a few weeks of each other. I got a legal cease and desist letter from a clown, and then I was personally denounced in a press release by a billionaire. So I just felt like, I've kind of like run the gamut in a few weeks. Maybe I should just retire. I'm probably not going to top either of these things.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Well,
So that occasionally you guys having your podcast, occasionally if you're posting on Instagram, you'll get somebody who's like, I think your stuff is great. You should be a brand ambassador. I just got a message on Instagram for our Rock and Roll Heaven page, and it says, we've looked over your profile, and you seem to be a great fit for Smooth My Balls. They are interested in working with you. Please drop them a message here at Smooth My Balls.
Well, the algorithm must be picking up on TJ2.
Well, our previous sponsor, if you'll remember,
Adam and Eve.
Yes,
we were Adam and Eve, and I actually called I put the kibosh on that because I was like, I am not doing a native read of adult toys with my brother
and your husband. Yeah,
but because the main reason she's
brother, no.
I mean, right? We're not. We're not from that far south. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that, and she can say that, it was creepy and weird all she wants to, that I would make the most ridiculous references and noises and stuff while she was trying to do those reads.
So I had to finally say screw it, and then I went into the studio and just recorded one and then played it in the episode just so get our we could get our little code out there without me having to turn colors of purple a human should not be if they were still existing.
Yeah, I don't think they saw an uptick in revenue.
Yeah,
for
I don't think they got
products.
I think we sold 3 toys, and it was probably
any of those that you get that you don't want to do. I think Lisa would be happy to go ahead and cut those for our show if you want to tell them.
Well, these folks smooth my balls.
Yeah, I'll forward the ad for Smooth My Balls.
Well, and feel free to edit this part out if you like. Feel free to edit this part out if you'd like to. But she would try to keep a straight face doing these reads for Adam and Eve, and I would say I would say things like, "Hi, I'm LD. You might remember me from Giant Butt Plug." And then she would bust up and be like, I have to read this. Shut up.
Hence doing it off the air.
Well,
yeah, there you go.
So I was going to tell her she just recorded one and just played it so that she didn't have to, because the real problem was that she couldn't get through a read because of me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sure. I have a brother. I have 2.
So LD, you worked.
She was only blessed with one. So
you worked on the Dave Chappelle show, right? LD?
Yes, I did.
I did. I forget which episode I heard you talking about that, but I think it was the Rick James episode.
It was it was the Rick James episode that we're talking about, because I basically lost to the bracket to the Black White Supremacists. But my skit was the skit season 2. I think it was episode 2, same episode with Black Gallagher and
Black Arnold's, I think.
Yeah, Whack Arnold's. Yes, Whack Arnold's. And my skit is the skit that I refuse to say the name to, but it is the skit where it was black and white, and it was a family with a last name, and then it had a catchy little theme song.
Oh, okay.
You can find it on YouTube.
Yeah, we know
Yeah.
exactly
So
what you're talking about. That was very funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
LD remains infuriated to this day that it was a couple of years ago the old website Grantland did a 64 team NCAA tournament bracket to determine the greatest Dave Chappelle show bit ever, and she made it. The one that LD was in made it to the Final Four and lost to the Rick James True Hollywood Story.
Okay, and that's what we were looking through that, trying to find you on the Hollywood Story, because he thought it was that, but yeah,
that's actually what she lost to.
I don't blame you though.
You saw the one with Charlie Murphy where
That's your opinion.
I'm sorry. I'm just very proud that I made it that far, because
yeah,
that's about as high as up as I'll ever be in any bracket.
Yeah.
The Final Four, that's some street cred.
The weird part about that was that it was so popular, and I was living in New York. It was so popular that I actually, the weird thing is like when I go out, I dress vintage. Like I do the vintage dresses and the pedal pushers and things like that. But like I'll be, in t-shirts and jeans, but like I would wear, period stuff because I find it incredibly comfortable. And so I would walk down the street and people would go, I know you. And then they go, oh my God, you're the N-word girl that was dating that boy. And I'm like, please stop yelling that at me in my face.
Yeah.
This is awkward and needs context.
Not exactly what you want to be, your signature.
Especially in public.
Yeah.
But, a high-profile performance nonetheless.
And I thought having a woman lick a napkin and rub it on my face to prove I had too much blush on was embarrassing.
Yeah, that's also embarrassing as well.
It's like, is that a thing you can do? Like lick people's faces and tell them they have on too much makeup?
If you're
not aware of that.
Well, yeah, this was an elderly woman. I was at my work at a hospital, and the thing is, I wasn't wearing any blush. I didn't have any makeup on at all. Just, I'm pale.
Yeah.
So my cheeks have a tendency to look red sometimes. And yeah, I had no makeup on and she still rubbed a napkin of her spit on my face just randomly. In the
hospital?
I was going to say, given what's happened the last year and a half or so, that's probably like assault.
No, that was more like 10 or 15 years ago. But it stands
that was before we had pandemic issues.
Yeah, it stands out.
Right.
I've basically been licked by strangers in public for no
Well, that's quite a distinction.
Not everybody could say that.
And you might think I would have been a little more upset, but honestly, my mother used to lick us to wake us up in the morning. So.
Oh, I saw her do that.
Yeah.
She did that. Okay. To me at our wedding.
She liked in the pictures. So we've got like the picture with his family, and there's him, me, and his parents, and they're all like beautiful, lovely, and decorous, and standing there with smiles on their faces. And then we get to the picture of my family, and you've got my dad staring to the right as my mother literally licks my husband on the face.
Right, she did it right as the flash went off.
And this is they kept.
Yeah. It was great.
So LD has lots of brushes with greatness just because of her line of work. But now Will has two of the best stories ever. One involves the band Survivor.
Yes.
That sounds good.
Yeah. Let's hear it,
Will.
So,
yeah, you got it. So we used to frequent a karaoke bar, which is sadly closed at this point. And one of their featured nights was porn star karaoke.
Which is, by the way, where me and him met.
Where we met, yes. In addition to
neither of us are porn stars.
Yes.
Just so we're clear, you went and there were porn stars there that would do karaoke. It was very odd. But we met the way that God intended, drunk in a bar.
Yep.
Right. So basically, like Ron Jeremy was up there singing Mr. Big.
Essentially, yes.
Hell!
Well done there.
He's going to prison for being a weirdo.
Yeah.
So it would attract, in addition to a generous number of those in the adult film industry, it would attract other celebrities as well, namely aging rock stars. And I remember us sitting there, and suddenly someone gets up to sing "Eye of the Tiger," and they're joined by several other people, and we realize, wait a minute. They're not just singing Survivor. That is Survivor. And so all the members of Survivor are on stage. They're singing the song. It's great. A few minutes later, I excuse myself to the restroom and I see one of the members there washing his hands and they're kind of talking. And as I make my way over to the urinal, I quickly realize that I am the only non-member of Survivor in the men's restroom.
Oh, that is cool.
So
it was just me and Survivor. Yep.
And
I
then
don't think it was the right time or place.
When you're in the bathroom, you got to be careful about when you ask for an autograph. So
yes.
But was he wearing?
There's a fine line. Yeah.
Well, there's a little joke. been celebrities who said that people would pass things under the stall.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
So
I'm sure that happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably in that bar too.
And then actually, that as great as that one is, my favorite one ever is when LD and Will in a very happenstance manner encountered James Taylor.
And there is photographic evidence of that. So you have to understand that he's one of my all-time favorite artists ever. Ever. Listen to him my whole life. That is not a superlative. So for my birthday at the Hollywood Bowl, LD got us tickets to James Taylor. And there was some kind of issue at the check-in gate.
Well, so we're at the gate, and then I look at him and I say, I know it's going to be a long wait for your birthday, but we will get in. And then this like big burly security guard walks over to me and he puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, "Excuse me, ma'am." And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, "There is another entrance around the corner." And so we leave.
Right. So I don't know if you know the Hollywood Bowl, but there's a very long hill that kind of goes up alongside to the amphitheater.
Right.
And so
at the back, there's like another entrance to the other side, like another security gate at the back, and everybody was like piling up at this one. So the security guard was like, go around to the back. There's another way. So I grabbed Will and I'm like, "Thank you, sir." And he looked at Will and he goes, "Happy birthday." And so we walk past the thing, and there are all the buses, like all the blue hair buses, you know, are lined up, like all these the people that are like riding in the Star Tour buses. So that like it's 60, 70 people to the concert at one time. So there's a ton of buses, and we're walking down past the buses, and then I'll let Will pick this back up.
So we're walking up past these buses, and there's just kind of hubbub of people going back and forth to the stage when we see a gentleman kind of crossing our path going, and I go, that guy looks a lot like James Taylor. At which point LD says, "Honey, that is James Taylor."
Oh,
At which moment I shut down completely.
He went from well-educated college graduate to a raisin on a leash.
Pretty much, and the raisin would have beat me in a spelling bee.
And so I beeline it for James Taylor because I'm like, it's my husband's birthday, So he takes a bunch of pictures with some older women and says thank you, and then the security guards step in, and I'm like, "Come on, Will, let's get your picture really quick." And he's like, no.
Yeah, I fell apart.
And I'm like, so I grab him by the throat and jerk him to James Taylor. I'm like, "I'm so sorry, Mr. Taylor. I know that you have a concert to get to, but it is my husband's birthday. He's been listening to you since 1979.
Yep.
Can you please have a picture?" And he stops everything he's doing, and we pass our phone to the security guard that initially said, "No more pictures."
That way,
Well, no more pictures. And James Taylor takes a picture with Will. And at this point, I say, "Thank you so much, Mr. Taylor. It's his birthday." And James Taylor turns to Will and says, "Happy birthday, sir." And Will just goes, "It's my birthday."
Yeah. That's all I could muster.
And then walks off.
Oh,
Just
man.
Yeah. So I think there is an important sort of, prescript to all this, and that's the fact that my love for James Taylor goes back before I knew it. As I got older and started listening to his records, I knew the songs, and people were like, "Oh, do you know this one?" I'm like, "No, I don't." What I actually learned was that when I was a baby, my mother would sing me James Taylor songs, so I would go to sleep.
Now the postscript to this,
from the beginning.
The postscript to this is that he has always been this massive James Taylor fan. And he's like, "I love James Taylor unapologetically." And he was like, he always felt a little bit nervous about what he did with James Taylor. Then later on, I am a huge Garth Brooks fan. And so we saw Garth Brooks in that intimate, setting of
maybe 200 people.
Yeah, maybe 200 people in the Wynn Hotel. And we were in the second, the second row. Mm-hmm. And he talked about how he was supposed to do a duet of Sweet Baby James with James Taylor. And so James started the song, and then Garth just sat there.
He froze.
And he froze. And he said, "You want me to start again?" And Garth didn't say anything. And so he starts again, and again he misses his cue. And he was like, "Do you not know the song Sweet Baby James?" And Garth goes, No. I just wanted you to sing it." And he was like, So he was like freaking out and he froze. And so when he was telling this story, Will just turns to me and goes, "See, if Garth Brooks gets nervous around James Taylor, I'm allowed to get nervous."
I was vindicated that day.
There you go. Yeah. Garth Brooks plays to like 50, 60,000 people sometimes. You know, so
yeah, for sure.
I do not. Yeah, so I think I'm allowed to freeze. Yeah.
So they have way more and better ones stories than I do, because this is going to come as a shock, y'all. There are not a ton of celebrities that make their way through Chester, South Carolina, where I work, or Union, South Carolina, where I live.
Now your daddy got drunk with Percy Sledge.
My dad and uncle both got drunk with Clarence Carter.
Sorry.
And he went to Otis. Yeah. Okay. So my dad and uncle. Anybody who's listened, I'll say anybody who has listened to Rock and Roll Heaven knows that, or has probably heard LD and I talk about the fact that until maybe I was about 13 years old or so, we were not aware that there was music made after about 1975, because that's all our mom listened to. She listened to oldies and Motown and stuff. Yeah, and my dad. Okay, so my dad and my dad and then my stepmother listened to a little bit of more modern music, but really, my dad mainly listened to like old soul music, like my mom did. So that's mainly what I heard until I was about 13 or so. Well, my dad and uncle were frequently in the audience for R&B shows, like back in the day, and we're talking like back in the era of like segregated crowds and stuff. So they would go to the Spartanburg Auditorium, which drew a lot of bigger R&B acts. And the way it worked there was, if the artist performing, and this is probably in the early 60s, the artist performing there was white, then white folks got to sit in front of the stage, and all of the members of the audience that were African American had to sit up in the balcony. If it was a black artist, however, then the white folks had to sit in the balcony, and the black audience actually got the good seats down front. So they watched Percy Sledge, James Brown, Wilson Pickett, Clarence Carter, all of these all-time greats at the Spartanburg Auditorium from the balcony. I don't know how they got backstage to drink wild turkey with Clarence Carter and his bass player, but that's what happened one night. They got completely hammered with Clarence Carter and his bass player on wild turkey.
Oh, jeez.
But so I haven't had nearly as many. My dad apparently also went to Otis Redding's funeral. That as legend has it. So now I've had a few. Now I've interviewed lots of athletes. I've interviewed lots of politicians that people would know and stuff. But I haven't had a lot of actor and music interactions, other than Felicia Rashad walked in our office and purchased randomly a newspaper one day. Her mother lives about a mile from our office. I have met Debbie Allen. She's like the nicest human being you can imagine. And her husband, Norm Nixon, who played for the Showtime Lakers with Magic and Kareem and James Worthy.
From fame.
But now I have met, I don't know if y'all are familiar with him, Robert Earl Keen, several times. Texas singer-songwriter who's fantastic, one of the best songwriters alive, in my opinion. And then I did get on the tour bus somehow of Charlie Robinson. Again, another Texas singer-songwriter. He was previously married to Emily from the Dixie Chicks. Okay. So I went to see him at a little place called the Handlebar in Greenville, South Carolina, at RIP Handlebar. It was a great mid-sized venue that drew some really good, I saw a ton of great shows there. But I go see Charlie there, and he was had kind of a niche audience. It's probably, there's 200 people there maybe, and great. It was a fantastic show or whatever. And so afterwards, he's signing stuff for people out in the lobby, and a guy I knew who was there, who knew some of the guys in the band, and actually shot the picture that's on the cover of Charlie's live album. Said, hey buddy, he said, I got us he got us on the tour bus. So we go out back, we're sitting on the tour bus, and we drank all of Charlie Robinson's beer. So this was like Charlie finally gets on the bus, and there was his guitar player was a guy named Kevin Carroll, who went by El Diablo, and Kim Deschamps, who played steel and stuff. And there was a young lady on the bus, and I don't think I have to say much more than that. And this guy named Fred and I literally drank all of their beer.
Mm.
So that's great until the bus has to roll out to go to their next stop, and Fred and I have to get off the bus, and we're both drunk. So
Yeah.
we then quite literally stumbled across an extremely busy highway to a Waffle House, and hammered down coffee and ate waffles and sausage patties and like scattered, covered, smothered, chunk top, diced peppered hash browns until we were dry and could drive home.
I mean, there was that one time I ate Carney Wilson's French fries.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
That was weird.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
did she kick your ass over that, or
No, she gave them to me. She was
she
like,
gave them to you? Oh, cool.
yeah, she's like,
I bet
hey, I know you guys have been driving all day. Do you want my fries? And I was like, okay, I could eat Carney Wilson's fries, or I could not eat Carney Wilson's fries.
You could
Now-
put them in a baggie and like hang them up in your room.
You did what
Yeah,
you
but
had.
see, now it's been through the body of 2 famous people. So
Yeah.
Well, she probably was one of these people who orders a whole thing of fries and eats 2 of them and gives the rest to her, to her table mate or whatever.
Mm.
I had
Don't you hate people like that? Like who doesn't eat French fries, for crying out loud?
or people that are on keto diets,
Right.
for instance.
They just need to taste that, like get that little tiny taste of like grease and salt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The most famous person I've ever met. This is a very quick story. I met Robert Duvall, and the extent of my conversation with him was, "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Duvall." That's the whole story.
I mean, I had a celebrity encounter last week, which was weird.
Yes, it was.
All I wanted was some cupcakes, and I ended up talking to Jay Leno. But I was working for Jay Leno.
Okay. I'm actually going to interject something here because I know we've been rambling for hours. It seems like at this point, and and y'all may have something else to do. LD, before we part company, must tell you her Dave Coverdale story because it's the best story ever.
Oh, I'm interested in this. I listened to a guy, the Get Your Rocks Off guy. I think that Cove is the cat's meow. They think he's like. Go ahead, LD.
So I was before I switched over to casting. I was working in a restaurant, which is now the location that I was working at is closed, but it was on the Sunset Strip. And so we would get a lot of like people into the restaurant, and I was the host. So, we had Adam Pascal that came in, and we would have Mickey Rourke and stuff like that. And none of that ever really got to me a lot. And then I had this guy walk in, and he's like, I do a terrible British accent. I mean, my brother will own up to it, but I do a terrible one as well. But it was like, yes, hello, can I please have a table for 2? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I walk over, I pick up 2 menus, walk them over, sit them down. And he's just kind of sort of goes like, he knocks on the table. He doesn't like snap his fingers or anything. He knocks on the table. Says, excuse me, ma'am. I said, walked over and said, yes. He goes, do you have pancakes? I said, yes, we do. Oh, excellent. Okay. Do you have blueberries? Yeah, we've got blueberries. He goes, okay, excellent. All right. Next step. Can you put the blueberries into the pancake? And I said, we absolutely can, sir. And he goes, very well, we shall stay. And then I was like, cool.
Well, who was it? Was
and
it
then I
Tom?
walked off, and I'm like, I walk off, and I'm like, and it was one of those things. It's just like a mime hitting a glass wall. I was just like, oh crap, that is David Coverdale.
That is the dude from Whitesnake, bigger than Kraut.
Yeah.
That's the dude that was married to Tony Katane and sang "Still of the Night," bigger than hell.
Mm.
Yep.
Right.
So that was my David Coverdale story.
That is pretty cool.
Well, that's.
And I mean, you'd be tempted to point at the menu and say, yeah, it's number 3. They're already in there.
I thought you were going to
It's
go
so
into
good.
5 easy pieces.
That's not actually like my favorite celebrity encounter. My personal favorite was spending 3 days with Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley. And then the first day, Gene Simmons told dirty jokes and like stuck his finger in my mouth and did some other weird stuff to me. And then the next day, he was like, let's talk about diversifying your portfolio. Like he was like giving me tax advice. And like, so by day 3, then he was just playing the triangle. So
Yes.
I had a very weird 3 days with Gene Simmons. You can actually see it in the movie Why Him with James Franco and Bryan Cranston. And it was a weird 3 days, but it was a lot of fun. And I have a fantastic Christmas picture with him.
And the really funny thing is that when she worked at that restaurant, she this was a place that celebrities would happen into from time to time. She called me once, all excited. She said, "Hey, TJ, who's that race car driver? The one that's really famous?" I was like, "There's several of them. What's the really good looking one?" I said, so she said, "It's the really good looking one." I said, "The only one that fits that criteria for me is Danica Patrick." So you're going to need to be more specific. It turns out that it was Jeff Gordon, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Or was it Dale Jr. or was it Jeff Gordon?
No, I think I would have remembered Dale Jr.
Yeah.
Gordon
and stuff like that.
But nice looking.
But very controversial among hardcore NASCAR fans. He was kind of a pretty boy or something of the whole circuit.
For sure. And then I forgot one, and I'm not going to tell the whole story, but I was an intern at a TV station when I was in college, and what was his name? Buffalo Bob or Bill? Not the one from the Silence of the Lambs, the one that was on Howdy Doody. Bill, yeah. I think it was Bill.
Buffalo Bob.
Yeah, he was like a celebrity guy that was playing at a pro-am golf tournament, and that's who they gave us to do a promo that we were recording for this charity pro-am golf tournament or whatever. And there was one hole, it was a par 3, but if you hit a hole in one, you won a baby grand piano, which they had sitting in a sand trap, oddly. And so he walks up to the into the sand trap, and he messes around with the piano for a second, and you can see him, his eyes are kind of looking up, and he's kind of nodding his head, and he goes, "Okay, I'm ready." And he did a 30-second promo on the nose with no script. Total pro. But then he looks at me and he says, and feel free to edit this part if you want to. He told me a dirty joke.
Okay.
He goes, "Hey kid, what did one lesbian frog say to the other one?" I said, and I'm horrified at this point that he's even talking to me, much less that he's asking me this. I said, "I don't know." He said, "Tastes like chicken," and walked off.
Yeah. That one never fails to hit the mark.
Yeah, the tastes like chicken joke.
And died not long after that, actually, if I remember correctly.
Womp womp.
Yeah, right. That's
But I couldn't believe what a pro though that he did, and I mean
TJ, let them talk. It's their podcast.
Oh no, I'm
I've had a few beverages. I've had a few beverages. I apologize.
Yeah.
Our show is your show. How about that?
My most, I guess, fascinating quote unquote celebrity, a local celebrity who did late night movie hosting. He was very famous for this. He was also very famous for being drunk. I was walking down the rows at a concert trying to find my mom to get back to my seat. I was at a concert with my mother, and he was coming up signing autographs, and we literally body slammed each other.
No.
He was a very small man, and he went down. I was 14, so of course I ran like heck.
Yeah. His name was Bob Shreves.
Yes, Bob Shreves. But yeah,
Cincinnati legend.
Right. He was a local Cincinnati celebrity, and he ended up doing these late night things, and he was always very drunk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Cincinnati legacy, the music legacy here is the Cincinnati Gardens. We live about half a mile or less from where Cincinnati Gardens used to be.
We live less than 5 blocks from the Gardens. People will, if there's overflow from this venue, back when they actually tore it down recently because they couldn't get rid of the mold.
Yeah, but the Beatles, Elvis, the Doors.
Anybody you can think of
big,
played the Gardens. Yeah.
So they tore that down. And that was really sad, when they tore that down. It was an Art Deco building, reminiscent of
it was so riddled with mold that they literally could not get it out.
And then the other thing is probably King Records, and we live probably a mile from where King Records was, and that's where James Brown recorded. Papa's Got a Brand New Bag, I guess, or Man's World.
One of his more famous songs.
A lot of Motown artists recorded at King Records. So music is part of the history here in Cincinnati for sure.
And I really like Moorline beer, by the way.
Moorline beer, Hootapole.
There's quite a few brands of beer from here.
Yeah.
I had one time. It was called Over the Rhine, I think, more like.
Yeah, Over the Rhine is
that. I really dug. Yeah.
And there is a brewery down there. We've had a resurgence of local breweries, a major resurgence, but we were
microbreweries.
I think that the first beer brewery in the country might have been here.
Yeah.
German immigrants. Or the first German beer, maybe something. There's something we were the first involving beer. Possibly the first to drink the most beer.
Well, you know what? I guess a lot of good.
Yep.
A lot of time today, especially after they've already cut their own podcast earlier. So I really appreciate it. I think I'm going to close it out by just talking about what's up next, each individually. Which heavy hitter are you looking forward to doing next? We'll start with Will the Thrill.
All right. Well, to expand on what I said earlier, Jim Croce is my next subject and one I have been longing to cover. Yeah, it's going to be a good one. Well, bring your hankies because it is a sad story, and the more I look into it, the sadder it gets, and it's going to be really touching.
Yeah, I can't listen to Time in a Bottle without a little bit of verklempt.
Yeah, it's his music, his legacy, and then I'm following that one up with Lane Staley from Alice in Chains.
Oh, another good one.
Absolutely, yeah. Both ones I'm really looking forward to.
Right. Elza?
Sorry.
He was saying who's next for you?
Yeah.
I'm my next series is Please Don't Envy Me at All is actually Michael Jackson.
No.
I've already got 6 or 7 books. I've got 14 different documentaries. We've got his stuff with, the Jackson 5 stuff later on in his life, his solo career, things that he did with his sister and all the different subsequent shows and tours. And I mean, it's going to be a beast. And so where Dusty, I thought was going to suffer because I didn't have that much to go on when it came to research. There's so much here. So I'm not totally looking forward to that. Plus, he's a very controversial figure. So I have to kind of take politics out of that because we don't do politics on the show. And after that, I will be doing someone who people might not even consider a singer, but she was good enough to get the role of Sugar Cane, and that is Marilyn Monroe.
Another big one.
Yeah, I think that there was a point where she wanted a singing career, I thought.
Yeah,
I that effect.
And so I should point out something because I noticed in the email that you guys were actually very excited about another artist that we were covering. But unfortunately, we have what is called the audible. And so if someone passes away and you want to replace them, we gave each of the creators the ability to call one audible, which meant that they could swap out an artist with a different artist. And my brother did that for Eddie Van Halen. So he actually chose to get rid of Elvis Presley for this go round to do Eddie Van Halen,
which was painful because I was so happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was just saying I was so looking forward to doing one on Elvis because that's somebody that LD and I literally grew up listening to from the time we were tiny little kids until my wife went to an estate sale last night and I instructed her to purchase some Elvis albums that she said were there. That's how it went. That's how that goes. And
I'll go ahead and part my stories about Elvis that I know of to you. I'll just email that to you for consideration.
Yes, please do.
Definitely use that. We'll definitely use because we have to do one on Elvis eventually. Yeah. So I mean that's definitely gonna. But we did a draft to pick our heavy hitters.
Oh wow!
Elvis. Only one. It was only one date, right? Or
no.
Was it two?
Okay. So real quick, Penny Banner was a wrestler back in the 50s and early 60s, and Elvis was a wrestling fan. And he would, every town he'd go to, I guess, he would like to have a
lady come over.
Yeah, a nice evening. So he would, and they were all crossing paths, because they were Elvis was on tour doing his shows and these wrestling shows, and sometimes they'd meet up, just along the road, and sometimes they just had dinner or something like that. But at other times, they would go back and have an evening together. And so I'll leave it at that because something happened in the room that's pretty funny, and it's adult nature, but it's documented in Penny's book, because Penny wrote an autobiography before she passed about 10 years ago.
Oh, wow.
She recounts it, and I'll send you that passage from her book. But it's got photographs to support it. So
yeah,
it's not anything racy from the hotel room, but like news clippings actually of them together.
Yeah.
So
oh wow.
Yeah, and the other one is we had a crazy friend of the family who claimed to have had a relationship with him, but that one I can't quite document.
Who was that?
I did work with a guy previously who was a bit older than me, who had seen Elvis play. I think at the old Charlotte Coliseum, and this was later in Elvis's career. I think not way long before he died, but he was his backing band I think was like J.D. Sumner and the Stamps, and he said that when J.D. Sumner hit the lowest low note on Way Down, he said literally his seat shook.
Wow.
Because if you've ever heard, just Google J.D. Sumner lowest note. He sang the lowest note ever recorded, and it's almost gross sounding. It sounds disgusting.
You said J.D.
And just real quick, we are currently by the time your listeners are able to hear this, we will have started a series. I'm taking the lead on Tom Petty.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
You mentioned that. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And then I finish up the year, I think, with Tammy Wynette.
You also have George Jones as well, so I don't know why what would happen there
without George Jones, right?
Yeah, well, there'll be lots of George in the Tammy episode, I'm sure.
So it's going to be. So we really actually liked this draft concept because I don't know if you guys know about our lives, but my brother is the editor of the newspaper. I am a small business owner, but also I'm a casting producer, and so. I'm working from 6 a.m. to like 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. And so it's actually nice to have these guys, Will himself, like he can work because he works, as one of the talent acquisition managers of one of his companies. And we don't have a ton of free time,
right.
Like at all. Like Will can come home at like 7:30, 8 o'clock at night sometimes. And so like we try to get all this stuff. So like, doing the draft gives us an opportunity to take some breathing time because I have to edit the episodes and they do their research. We have to record it. We have to get it down. We got to get, it's got to be up by Wednesday at noon. And so it's like, taking that draft approach where we do these heavy hitters, that can put you off for 4 weeks where you can do your own research and get ahead. And so instead of having to crank out something that's kind of might be subpar, if we only did one episode or like, only hit the highlights, this person that you might already know about. And like, what's the point of listening to something you already know about?
Yeah. But all the more reason I appreciate you taking the time with us this week. So why don't we close it out by just letting people know where they can, your socials, where they can find.
Okay. So you can find us on Twitter at Rock and Roll LT. Our Instagram is Rock and Roll Heaven LT. Our Facebook's Rock and Roll Heaven Pod. We're still not saying our website. And you can email us at rockandrollheavenlt@gmail.com. We wanted our names come from like the old DJ names from like the 70s and 80s. So like it's TJ the DJ, and he's now TJ2 since he's the second TJ. He's the Deuce. And then Will is Will the Thrill, and I'm LD. And then that actually, I worked for a Chinese television company. And so they would call me LD, and it stood for Little Dictator. Because I would yell at people because they were smoking.
Yes.
So now we know a little more about you.
I have smoking myself.
Well, the guy who does that thing at the beginning, that's really cool too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's actually a gentleman named Johnny Rock. Mm-hmm. He is a voiceover artist actor he was originally from Louisiana. He now lives in Texas, and he just did that for me, like without me asking. I got a message from him on Facebook, and he's like, "Hey, Lindley, heard you have a podcast. Here's your intro." And I'm like, "Thank you."
Wow.
And then when we switched over, I was like, "Hey, I know that you did this when we did the switch over of hosts." I was like, "Hey, can you do this again? We'll pay you totally." He was like, "I don't want any payment. Just like tell people about my organization." I'm like, "Done." And then, And so he did it twice, and we're very grateful because I think it fits with the aesthetic. Because actually, we will be covering DJs like Wolfman Jack in the future.
And little known fact, LD was born in Louisiana, where that guy's from.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, definitely.
So what is his organization
voice.
again?
I do not remember. We mentioned it several times, but he's got projects coming up. So anytime like he has something, we totally want to talk about it because he was just so generous with his time to do that for us. So we're eternally grateful. He did such a good job.
For sure.
It's great.
Wolfman Jack's such an iconic sound, but I guess not everybody knows it right off the bat.
Yeah.
I think it's a national known thing.
Yeah.
I do have a question. The song Clarence Carter, is that about Clarence Carter?
Which
Clarence Carter?
Yes, there's a song. They used to play it at a bar we used to go to. My parents.
are you talking Stroking?
Huh? Yes.
Where the end it goes, Clarence Carter. I don't actually know if that's about him. It might be.
It might be. He had I think his big really big hit was Slip Away. That was probably his biggest one. But then he had Stroking, and then he had one whose title I'm not going to say that came out later. But him, my dad, Wild Turkey.
Okay.
Thing that happened.
Cool.
All right. Well, it's been a blast.
Yep.
And you're welcome back whenever you.
And we very sincerely appreciate the invite, and I'm not just sucking up because we're talking to you. I had endless fun listening to that the first episode of your podcast that I checked out. It was you guys are absolutely on the right track with what you're doing. You do a terrific job.
I mean, it's really just us talking and asking questions that were, things that actually just come up in our heads.
We're kind of all over the place. We've done true crime. We've done music now. We've done books. People want us to read their books when they have come on, and we're trying to get to those people. But
we've got a young man named Servon Campbell who one day out of the blue he gets contacted by Hall?
John Oates.
Yeah, John Oates.
Paul Oates.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. He's like, no, this can't be real. But it was real, and they're going to do
they're doing a song.
Yeah,
together.
they're doing a song on like a concert song together on what's it called? I don't remember right now.
Well, it's on the current current episode if you guys want to listen to that. But.
Yeah, but it's
there was an 80s
there was
an 80s cover band I saw once called John Oates and the other guy from Wham.
The thing that brings me the most joy that I know that's in existence is there is a phone number that you can call, and it's called Callin' Oates, and at will you can press a button and choose which song from Hall & Oates that you'd like to hear. And that just knowing that someone made this makes me so happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well.
Okay. Thank you, listeners, for joining us on YUH again with Lisa
and Phil.
And this week, Rock and Roll Heaven with LD, JT, and
Will the Thrill.
TJ2.
I've been called worse.
All right. We all have it.
I promise I've been called worse.
We're over 50.
Yeah, you're right.
That's okay.
Okay,
we're over 40.
Down. Write these down.
Yeah.